Welcome to The Next Word. I'm your host, Christine Warnke, and today there are currently over 500 journalists detained around the world, according to Reporters Without Borders. Journalists are often targeted for criticism and targets of regimes trying to control the narrative. Today we have two special guests who will talk about what they're doing to protect our journalists and the challenges on the global stage. Our first guest, Christian Caryl, was an op-ed editor international at the Washington Post and the author of Strange Rebels, 1979 and the Birth of the 21st Century. From 2004 to March 2009, he headed the Tokyo Bureau of Newsweek. After 9/11, he reported from Iraq and Afghanistan as part of Newsweek's coverage of the War on Terror and has reported from over 60 countries. And in the second half of The Next Word, we will speak with attorney and international human rights activist Pedro Pizano. But first, welcome to Christian, and thank you again for being here, Christian.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's terrific. Let's start. How did you decide you wanted to get into journalism?
Oh, well, the short version of that is that I was living in Berlin in 1989 at the end of the 80s. For a variety of reasons. You know, I was a student in Germany and so forth. And I began working as a local helper for American correspondents who were coming to report on the collapse of communism in East Germany. And the next thing I knew, I was sneaking into East Germany to attend demonstrations and witnessing the collapse of the communist system in Eastern Europe and the fall of the Berlin Wall. I was right there in the middle of it, and that kind of gave me the bug, and it's all been, it's all been downhill ever since then.
Well, it's been uphill. My God, you've had. I mean, being a journalist, being in an international arena, I'm sure you've had many challenges. We know. Can you talk about some of them? Because I know it'd be interesting to find out what.
Well, I have a particular soft spot in my heart for war correspondence. I did spend a bit of time on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq during the global war on terror. I wasn't really a combat correspondent. That wasn't really my job, and I didn't really need to be on the front lines like, for example, the photographers do. Right. If you're a photographer, you need to be up front and, where the action is. Writing for a news magazine, I didn't have to do that, but I experienced some things, and it made me very appreciative of these people who really do put their lives on the line to get the news. Yeah. Journalists actually tend to be not very popular figures in many societies because, our job is to talk about stuff that people often would prefer to ignore, and that can be kind of, unpleasant. People are sometimes like, why do you have to bring that up? Why do you have to, you're not being respectful to the president or something or other. But journalists, I see them as kind of, they serve a function almost like an immune system. They're like antibodies. You have to understand the problems of society. Society has to understand itself in order to fix problems. And if you're just clamping down on things and not trying to discuss the actual problems of society, you're going to have problems. Absolutely. And I think I would argue that's one of the reasons why democracies tend to be more flexible and resilient, because we can actually discuss our problems and talk about fixing them.
And you also have to learn all the cultural nuances.
Yes.
When you're working with other journalists, other people from those countries, can you talk about any one of instances where there was an issue where you were really kind of frightened about being on the ground in some of these countries?
Oh gosh, so many times when I was frightened about being on the ground in these countries. One of the things you learn very quickly is the more you can rely on local people, the better off you are. And in Iraq, with Newsweek, we had this tremendous support system when I worked in Baghdad. And we, at some point early in the conflict in 2003, we started hiring our own group of local fixers, as they're called in the business, who ran logistics and helped us with interpreting and translating and organization. And we ended up hiring most of the members of a single family, several brothers in the same family. And one of them was the driver, and one of them helped with organization and so on and so forth. And you really got this tremendous sensitivity for the cultural nuances of what you were dealing with. I remember once I was writing a story about prostitution in Iraq, which was a very, very delicate subject. And there were these organized crime groups kidnapping young women, and in some cases young men, and then spiriting them off for, trafficking purposes. And I remember that amazing moment when the Iraqis explained to me that if, maybe this is too graphic for our purposes, I don't know, but basically it boiled down to, if a woman was kidnapped kidnapped and subjected to prostitution against her will, if the family got her back, they had to kill her because she had been dishonored. And then my photographer said, what about if it's your son who was kidnapped? Would he have to be killed if he was recovered? And they said, no, that's fine.
Well, that's shocking.
It wasn't his fault. There's this deep-seated honor culture in that society.
Those societies, of course.
And when you're working in these situations, you don't often grasp right off the bat how deep some of these things are, right? They can go very, very, very deep. And you can't just say, oh, well, that's so mean and so brutal and uncivilized. You have to understand where this comes from.
Absolutely.
It's not pretty. It's not great, but you have to understand the society and where these things come. That's the product of a deeply tribal culture that has an honor culture system. Yes. And you know what? There are a lot of countries in the world that have that. So
absolutely,
it's having that understanding has really helped me grasp a lot of problems that places like that have.
And they don't have a free press.
And they don't have a free press. In fact, and by the way, Iraq, for all the mistakes of our invasion and occupation of Iraq, Iraq is a remarkably liberal country by regional standards now. They have pretty free elections, and they're still trying to form the government right now after an election they had a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
That doesn't happen in other Middle Eastern countries.
No, it's interesting.
So
you're right. Iraq is really...
The invasion of Iraq, I'm not sure I would be in favor today, but it has had some interesting consequences, right, that I think are also worth discussing.
And of course, you've been this almost all your life. Reporting on all, and you've been in all these countries, these 60-plus countries. What can the average person be doing in terms of not only understanding just the freedom of the press and what the press means in terms of, protecting and giving the truth? What could you tell the audience today?
Well, I think there are two things. One is, don't succumb to cynicism. Most of the journalists I know are actually trying to get at the truth. That really is true, I remember getting lots of hate mail while I was at the Washington Post, mostly from extreme right-wingers claiming, and they seem to have this idea that I was working for the Democratic Party, and I went to, I would walk down the hall, there was a doorway at the end with people from the Democratic National Committee who would tell me what to do. That's just horse feathers, right? I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. Most journalists, I think, are, proper, legacy journalists. Lamestream journalists are actually trying to get at the truth in some way. That's why we got into the profession. So I think the first thing we can do is not succumb to cynicism, try to give those people some respect and understand what they're trying to do. That doesn't mean to exempt them from criticism, but try to understand generally what they're trying to do. And I think the second thing is that the best thing you can do is to act like a citizen. Journalists are not trying to tell you what to think.
Right.
I think that's a common misconception. When I write a column, I'm not trying to impose my ideas on you. I'm trying to provoke discussion. I'm trying to help you understand things that are happening in the world. If you disagree, fine. But inform yourself. Don't just stay in your bubble. Don't just stay in your echo chamber. Don't just listen to whatever slop the AI mechanisms feed you or the chatbots feed you. Try to really inform yourself and challenge your own ideas. I was reading a great column by my favorite columnist in the Financial Times today, Chandan Ganesh, and he was saying, it's been a good year if you have changed your views about something fundamentally at some point during the year. And then he explained what had happened to him this year that forced him to modify one of his deeply held views. And I thought that was a great yardstick. Like, be a citizen. Right. Don't just be a schlub lying on the sofa absorbing conspiracy theories. Be a citizen. Be active. Inform yourself. Get out there. Talk to other people. I think that's what I would say.
And that's what you would tell if you were talking to our younger generation today and trying to get them involved in this field, which has its challenges and
Yes.
securities and many other issues. How would you engage them? What would you tell them?
Well, that's a great question, Christine, because it is such a difficult environment for people coming out of college now. My heart goes out to them. It's so rough out there.
Yeah.
And of course, the whole media landscape is changing fundamentally. I'm not sure I would tell people to try to be a writing journalist in a newspaper the way that I was for a while, or in a news magazine. I mean, that's a great example. News magazines, like the one I worked for, don't even exist anymore. I mean, that's just already a dead thing. I worked for Newsweek when it was still a proper news magazine that you could buy next to the counter when you check out with your groceries. And there were actual reporters and correspondents doing work on the ground, and photographers. Doesn't exist that way anymore. It's just a website now. So I'm not even sure what kind of website or who owns it. But, it's a profession that is changing as we sit here and discuss it. And I see people doing fantastic work on YouTube, the YouTube commentators. I see people doing great work on social media. It's a whole different media universe now.
Right.
But to be a citizen, you really have to inform yourself a little bit about where this person is getting their information and what kind of methods they're using. It can't just be, he said he did his own research, so I guess I can trust him. You want to apply a bit of critical questioning to the people that you see offering this stuff up. So I think, I tend to tell people, if you can get a job overseas, especially if you have language experience, and you can try out working as a foreign correspondent for one of the big news wires or something along those lines. I mean, that's certainly a great professional background to have if you can still figure out a way to do it nowadays. Right. But, I have to admit, I'm hard-pressed to tell members of the younger generation what they should do now, because it's such a wide-open field. AI, of course, by the way, transforming everything as we speak.
Everything, yes. Can you comment today on the Washington Post op-ed on the Jimmy Lee article? I mean, his daughter wrote the piece on her father, which was really compelling to me.
A very moving piece.
Very moving piece. Oh.
This was Claire Lai, who's writing about her father, Jimmy Lai, who's 78 years old, who's already been in prison for 5 years. I remember the days. I spent a semester teaching journalism in Hong Kong, by the way, so I remember Jimmy Lai and his paper very vividly. They were one of the best organizations publishing critical stuff about Hong Kong. Fantastic place, by the way, which has really, really been brutalized by the Chinese over the past 10 years. Used to be a place of such vitality and democratic spirit. And Jimmy Lai sort of stood for that. But here he is, the 78-year-old man being totally bullied by the Chinese authorities, by the Chinese authorities, treated with absolute brutality. And the question always arises in these cases when you see one of these repressive regimes doing horrible things to journalists. What are they afraid of? Why should the Chinese Communist Party be afraid of this single individual, this 78-year-old man who's shivering in solitary confinement? Why should they be so afraid of him?
And they're going to leave if he could get out, they would leave. I mean, according to
probably
Claire.
Yeah. And the answer is, of course, they're afraid of the truth.
Right.
They're afraid of people with alternate viewpoints. Right. They're afraid of people who don't conform to the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party. Right. And that fear, I think, underlies a lot of what these repressive regimes think about journalists, right? Vladimir Putin is another great example, right? Erdogan in Turkey, great example. Unfortunately, we see that tendency now in a lot of democracies as well. China, good God. India is still nominally a democracy, but the way that government treats journalists, really appalling.
Really? Oh, that's really.
It was in India, from Indians, that I first heard the term social media militia. In India, if you write things that attack the prime minister, they won't necessarily sue you or put you in jail. They'll assail you with thousands of people on social media, and people will come and stand outside your house and look up at your windows. Oh my God. And they'll tell people, they'll dox you and harass you and do all these things. They don't have to arrest you. They can just turn your life into hell.
Well,
and we're seeing that in a country that for a long time prided itself on being one of the world's leading democracies.
Absolutely.
I think that's really a shame.
You know, I wish we could talk more about this, but thank you. And then I know you're involved with the John McCain Institute, and we're going to hear from the director of the International Human Rights Initiative, Pedro Pizano, but thank you.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Come back and
Again,
talk more.
Something I feel very strongly about.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be able to do it.
Tremendous issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching The Next Word. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Today, tens of millions of refugees have been forced from their homes. But you can make a difference. Act now. Even small amounts make a big difference. Visit supportcrisisrelief.org.
Welcome back to The Next Word. I'm your host, Christine Warnke, and I want to introduce Pedro Pizano, who is the director of the John McCain Freedom for Political Prisoners Initiative and Global Democracy Programs at the McCain Institute in Washington, D.C., where he leads advocacy to free jailed journalists, political prisoners, and hostages. His work brings together journalists, former detainees, families, and policymakers, drawing in part on the leadership of Diane Foley following the murder of her son, journalist James Foley. Thank you so much again, Pedro. I know you were my previous guest, but so much has happened in the last couple of weeks, including what happened with the work of Belarus and the release of all these prisoners due to the work of John Cole.
Absolutely.
And if you could talk about that, that was phenomenal. So.
Phenomenal and a miracle, really, Christine. Thanks for having me. 123 prisoners by one count were released, I think, between Friday and Saturday of this week. This was thanks to the Trump administration, specifically John Cole and General Keith Kellogg. They lifted sanctions, and one of the prisoners there, Maria Kolesnikova, who is a musician, a politician. She is an incredible human being, was one of the ones who was released. She was one of her first cases, and we're just incredibly thrilled for her family, but also for all of Belarus that can see these people as a representation of what a free Belarus can be. These are the people that are willing to put their life and liberty at risk for freedom. And so in celebrating them and freeing them, we're talking about the freedom of Belarus and the freedom of Europe as a whole. As we know, Belarus is that state where Russia sends drones to fight in Ukraine. And so hopefully by freeing these political prisoners and more, we can push Belarus to liberalize and one day Russia to fall and for Europe to be at whole and at peace.
And something too, that's phenomenal. Something too, but you mentioned in earlier conversations about Venezuela and what we did in Venezuela, which is very timely.
Very timely as well right now. And we do have a person in Venezuela we're trying to free, Jesus Armas. He was both a McCain leader and an Obama leader. And he's sitting since a year ago in a Venezuelan prison. This American administration, as well as the prior one under Biden, but this one in particular, actually both, they freed all the Americans that were held in Venezuela, but they didn't stop there. They asked the Venezuelans to free, in the case of Biden, at least 20 to 40, and they stayed on the tarmac. There's a beautiful documentary about this. 20 to 40 Venezuelans that the United States didn't have to do anything about. Trump did the same thing. 80 of them were released in the last swap. And they just used their power well. And that's what we're trying to encourage them to do. Use Senator McCain's legacy and his voice to encourage and promote this bipartisan issue, that you can get all Americans home and you can also free all political prisoners. It's in the U.S. national interest, and that's what we're here to do.
What you've all done at the Institute, talk a little bit about FIPS, what you've been able to do in terms of other prisoners and certainly journalists, which I know there's been tremendous work that's been expended on, on their behalf, and you can give us an update on.
Thank you. Yeah, we would love to. We're actually we have an advisory council, and it's chaired by the great Vladimir Kara-Murza, a Pulitzer Prize winner, whose columns from prison. He went to prison for his words, and his words won a Pulitzer Prize. And the man who edited those columns is with you here today, Christian Caryl. He won a Pulitzer, he leads our board, and we helped free him. He went to jail for 25 years for his words, and those words won a Pulitzer. We're working on at least 2 cases for journalists right now. Jimmy Lai, whom we spoke about, the verdict came out on Monday. It's very likely that he faces life in prison, and he's already 78 years old. If he dies in prison, press freedom dies in Hong Kong. That is what this case means. That is why he's in jail. As Christian said, they fear the truth, but they're trying to destroy, and they have actually destroyed press freedom in Hong Kong. It is in jail, and if he dies, it will die with him.
You know, I'm a huge admirer of the late John McCain. And if he was here today, I know he would be working diligently to try and get the freedom of these, like Jimmy Lai and others. Can you talk a little bit about how he inspired the staff, the current staff of the Institute, and why you all are so committed?
Absolutely. We're so lucky to try to further his legacy and that of his family for a safe, free, and just world, particularly because he was in prison himself for 1,966 days, and he would not leave until all people who were taken before him were also released. And he was released with 108 people. Maria Kolesnikova, who was just released in Belarus, would not leave until all, and there were 122 people that were released with her. So what inspires us is that legacy of McCain. That's where his legend was born. He could have left the first week. He didn't. He was tortured for 5.5 years because he wouldn't leave. And throughout his life, he always encouraged dissidents around the world. He supported all the political prisoners. We always tell this story of Jason Ryan, who's also, as Christian and Vladimir, on our advisory board, that when he was in jail in Iran, he said a lot of people said they would get him out. Presidents, secretaries of states, members of the European Parliament, and John McCain. And he knew 2 things about Senator John McCain. 1, that he was serious about it, and 2, that Senator McCain wasn't doing it for his own glory. Right. And that is what we're trying to do at the McCain Institute, to free people like Jimmy Lai, to free people like Maria, who we just helped free. We did a lot of advocacy there. And we have another journalist in Georgia called Mcia Amaglobeli. She founded the 2 independent newspapers in Georgia. She's in jail. They provoked her to the point that she slapped a police officer on camera, and now they're using that as a pretext to give her a very long sentence. And it is very clear that in Georgia, and in any country, right, repression doesn't start with tanks. It always starts by putting the journalists in jail.
Absolutely. So, in light of that too, how do you decide on what cases to work on and to pursue? And we try to focus on cases where Senator McCain's voice has influence. So Georgia's a case where he stopped his 2008 campaign when Russia invaded Georgia, and he said, "We are all Georgians," so Georgians love him. So first, McCain's influence. Second, we have to find a connection with the family, and they consent, because we work very closely with the families. And third, cases where we think that we can make a difference, right? There's cases that we don't have the capacity or we don't have the knowledge, so we want to do those 3 things: McCain's voice, close coordination with the family, and that we have an avenue for success. But you also, though, took on recently, well, not even more recently, the children, the Ukrainian children. Which is impossible. Which was something that's phenomenal that you've gotten it to the UN and to the level that people are really paying attention.
Yes, and hopefully we pay. I was at the State Department today talking a little bit about this, and the First Lady brought 8 of them back home. There's 19,546. It's a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. They're taking these children from Ukraine and putting them in re-education camp and telling them that all Ukrainians are Nazis. Right. And when the war ends, they're going to come, especially the young boys. It's going to be a big, if they come back, but they need to come back. And so we're trying to label them, all of them, it's never been done, as arbitrarily detained, all of them. And so that's what we're trying to do, and it seems this State Department is particularly focused on this. The new Assistant Secretary for DRL, Mr. Riley Barnes, I think, is interested in this issue, and so we hope to work with this administration and all administrations to get these children home and end this war.
And having the government and having our U.S. government and their involvement in negotiating is tremendous. there are other hurdles, of course. Can we touch upon those hurdles?
100%. We mentioned Diane Foley at the beginning. Diane Foley's son, Jim Foley, was beheaded by ISIS publicly.
Right. Oh, that's right.
It was the second most remembered image in America after 9/11.
Wow.
When Jim Foley was taken, he was taken with other people. And those other governments negotiated, but the US government was unable to negotiate. And thanks to Diane Foley, she turned tragedy into purpose, and she changed everything about the US government. There's like 50 people working on cases just because of what Diane Foley. There's a whole hostage enterprise.
Wow.
And in that hostage enterprise, the US government is able to get its own citizens out. Now it's working on other cases, but this is a thing that other governments don't have. So I was just in England because they want to set something up that is similar. Same with Canada, same with Australia. The Five Eyes are starting to do that. So the big thing is that there's no infrastructure, really, apart from the United States. There's no laws to tell you when someone is wrongfully detained. There's no way to punish the perpetrators. There's just an executive order that came out for the first time that we can label an entire country as a state sponsor of hostage taking. It's never been used. It just came out on September 5th.
It just came out?
September 5th.
Wow.
It's never been used. So for the first time, we're getting actual deterrence tools to stop people from taking hostages and using them as leverage. When we're trying to get people out, journalists, political prisoners, dissidents, hostages, we work in two fashions. One is advocacy and awareness. We raise the case to the profile where someone like John Cole can get them out, like he just did in Belarus. Maria was included in that list. We worked really hard for over a year to do that. We don't know if it was us. This is a team sport. It doesn't matter who takes the credit. As Jason Rosine says, what matters is that people get out. And the second thing is we are developing track 2 diplomacy. So Governor Richardson, when he left government, was very famous for doing that. He would take his own plane, go to Russia and get people out. There's other people like Mickey Bergman, who was his deputy, now doing this. And Ambassador Carstens, who was the second held highest appointee of the Trump administration, who served the entirety of the Biden administration, the SPIHA. He was the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs. This was the office that Diane Foley helped create. So there's now one person in the US government that is responsible and accountable for getting people home, and that's the SPIHA. And Ambassador Carstens has joined the McCain Institute's John McCain Freedom for Political Prisoners initiative. We call it FPPI, to do that track 2 diplomacy, to actually go to these countries and get them out. So we focus advocacy, recovery, and then on the side we focus on support, justice and accountability, and deterrence.
And the office is under the Department of State?
It's an interagency, but yes.
Interagency.
SPIHA under the Department of State. There's a fusion cell at the FBI, and there's a seat at the National Security Council, and someone else at the White House. So it's a whole enterprise in the U.S. government.
So going back to trying to engage other countries now, they're trying to replicate what's being done here.
Right.
And that's something that's there'll be some cooperation, and maybe something will be determined where it will be more of a international cooperative initiative?
There's a couple of vision. Yes, there's a couple of things going. There is a core group of countries which citizens are taking. Not all citizens are taking equally, and so a lot of European countries and the U.S. and Canada, they're forming a group. But Canada specifically has united 78 countries and the European Union in a declaration to stop hostage taking. So they just came out with a report, and we're trying to see if the types of laws that are here, the Levinson Act, named after Bob Levinson, who's the longest and held hostage in American history, he never came back. Same kind of laws in England, in Australia, and other countries, so that when something happens, when a citizen is taken, like people talk about this like Article 5, like NATO, Article 5, like when one of our citizens is taken, we all respond together. I think that's very far away, but I think we hope that in 10 to 15 years, there's really a deterrent mechanism that imposes a really, really hard cost on any country who decides to take Americans or French people or Swiss or Swedish, and so that no one is ever used again as a bargaining chip in geopolitics.
And I know the John McCain Institute is at the forefront of that, and we thank you. And I thank you for being here and talking about this very important issue, and congratulations on all the recent successes.
Thank you. We couldn't have done it with people such as Christian Caryl and Vladimir Karamurza, so we're really lucky to have that and to carry that legacy to get people home.
And you've got to come back and give us more success reports.
Happy to come back anytime. Thank you,
Thank you.
Christine. Thank you.
You've been watching The Next Word. Thank you so much. And thank you to my viewers for tuning in. I'm your host, and I'll see you the next time on The Next Word.